Welcome, everyone, to American Girls, the podcast. This is the podcast where we're reliving the American Girls series book by book. I'm Mary.
I'm still Allison-ish.
Wow, I see what you did there.
Thank
I feel
you.
it. I respect it. Today we gather to talk about Cultish, the Language of Fanaticism by Amanda Montell.
Ish.
But first, what's up? What's going down?
So I won't add ish to every single proper noun that we talk about today, but maybe just a few more.
That feels right.
Ish.
Yes.
So what have you been listening to? What have you been watching that you love?
So the new season of You Must Remember This is out. I don't know if you've caught that, but they're doing a season on Sammy Davis Jr. and Dean Martin.
Oh.
Which is actually really interesting so far. And it reminds me of that book by Jennifer Guglielmo that we both really like about Italian-American immigrants, and kind of comparing like how Dean Martin believed he was raised as other as a younger man, but ends his adult career as like very clearly a white respected entertainer, whereas obviously Sammy Davis Jr. doesn't get that opportunity. But it goes, in a lot of different directions and themes. And if you like her show, I think you would like this new season. But I'm enjoying it so far. Right now, there's an episode, I think, where I left off on Jerry Lewis.
Oh, boy.
And I'm not a huge fan of his, like, full disclosure, but, it's been interesting. So I've been doing that. I started watching Columbo on Peacock because, why not at this stage? And Murder, She Wrote, I'm done with that. So I'm moving on to other mysteries that won't make me sad before bed. And I'm also still watching Psych. So it's like 2005 in my house, or 1978, depending on your view. But how about you? What are you up to?
Yeah, I love those like medium stake crime dramas. So I really loved, I know that it feels like a betrayal to Starlee Kline, but I like listening to Heavyweight.
Wow.
Which I know is probably divisive, but the recent two-parter that Jonathan did on a woman called Barbara, and I won't say any more than that, is just fantastic. It has kind of a murder mystery element. It's really, really fascinating.
Ooh.
And it starts with his mother-in-law saying that she had this like wonderful summer with this woman, and she always wondered what happened to her and where did she go and what became of her life. And it is honestly just like shock after shock after shock. And while I listened to the first part of this, just something came to me. I have to listen to this in a Panera with a bread bowl. So I went and I got a bread bowl, and then I had a brownie, and I still wasn't done with it. So I walked around to Kohl's. So basically,
wow. But I thought you don't even like Kohl's.
I don't like Kohl's.
Wow. So this was like a real sacrifice for you, or it was just like, was it there? Like the Kohl's was just there?
I just really wanted to give it my full attention, and I have car podcasts and walking podcasts, and genuinely,
got it.
It's not a judgment on quality. There are different levels of attention that I need to pay. Someone in our Discord said that we are their end of the week podcast, which was really exciting to me.
Wow.
Like, we're their Friday afternoon commute podcast.
That's like, what a high compliment that is to help you like unwind. Like, wow, I don't think I'll ever come down from that compliment. No.
What's your Friday podcast?
I was just thinking about that. I listen to Bitch Sesh on Fridays on my, I've been working from home on Fridays, but I do listen to it on Fridays. I like to go walk around my complex or somewhere and listen to it because it's a recap show of The Real Housewives with Casey Wilson and Danielle Schneider. And I've been listening to that since the beginning. I don't really have time right now to be watching all of those shows. So it makes me feel like I kind of know what's going on. And as Ray Sani, who is a comedian who was on Keep It, which I know you've probably heard some of her episodes on that. She recently said like The Real Housewives have totally rebranded as like true crime, which is true. And so recently there have been a lot of legal battles, like there's a lot of drama going on in those franchises. So even though it is sort of heavier than it's been, it still is something I listen to kind of like even out. What about you? What's your Friday?
So I usually listen to the Patreon, and this is not a Patreon plug, but I love the Patreon for Obsessed with Disappeared. They cover the really, really bad ID shows, like Who the Bleep Did I Marry? That's literally what the show is called.
Oh my God.
And I really, really love those. I also sometimes save the undisclosed addendum, which is one of my absolute favorites. So, undisclosed comes out on Monday evenings, which is like, I listen to it sometimes. I just sit, like, so Monday is one of my days off, and I just sit and I just listen to it playing out loud like a boomer. And then later in the week they take Q&A, and I have participated previously, but they take Q&A and they answer them, and I listen to that episode at least once, usually twice.
Wow. Why twice? Just because you want to catch all the details the second time through, or
I have to listen to it twice. So a few of the people on that show, so it's partially scripted. Like they plan out, they have a producer, it's partially scripted. Everyone on that show talks in full paragraphs. And if I'm driving, I love their voices and I zone out really bad. So I like to re listen to it and make sure that I haven't missed any of the details. I'm not delusional enough to think that I will solve one of the crimes, but I do like to be super engaged, like the way that I would read a long form piece a few times if I really wanted to understand it, or a journal article. It's a very intellectual show that I like because they actually have gotten people out of prison. So I like to actually pay attention because the stakes are high. It's not just kind of a random story read off of Wikipedia. There's actual developments, and I love, love, love the host of this season. So there's a lot of things.
hmm. Well, it's good to have something that you love that much and like you have a way you like to take it in. And
Oh
it's
boy.
funny that listener is like reminding me of like that we do listen to different things in different settings. And I guess you don't even pay attention to the rituals that you might be creating around some of your behavior and maybe some of the shared language that you take on from said experience. Like we both listen to Who Weekly, and like Crunch Crunch might be a shared language of that cultish experience. Hard to say.
Should I read the summary for this book? This book goes a lot of different places, so I feel like I should give some kind of overview in case
It
people haven't had
does.
a chance to read it
Although,
yet.
did you want to talk about the Janet Jackson documentary that you watched?
Yeah, sure. So it's available on FX/Hulu, and it's one of the New York Times short pieces, and it's called Malfunction, and it's about what happened to Janet Jackson at the Super Bowl.
I've been waiting for this to come out. Although I believe isn't there another one coming out that she participates in? And it also has
Yes.
Mariah Carey and Beyonce and so on. When is that happening?
I don't know. I will say, I think this has the hallmarks of a lot of things that came out in my mind 2020 to 2021, which is it's sort of true crime adjacent and it has certain aspects. There were a lot of things that I felt got dropped in this, 70 or so minute piece where you were left to make a lot of your own conclusions, which I didn't really care for. I'll just say I don't think this is a spoiler. I don't like the different implications in this documentary about, quote unquote, if she was in on it. I don't think that
Ugh,
they kind
that's
of
gross.
landed on something. I do think where it was at its sharpest and where it made a very clear argument is something happened between the two of them, right? Like if they had planned for him to do something with her that was close to what ended up happening, they leave a lot of that for you to decide, which I didn't really care for because I thought we were going to get some answers. Where I think they do show the very powerful influence is of Les Moonves, and they make it very clear that he gave Justin Timberlake and Janet Jackson an ultimatum, and he said, if you don't act publicly contrite, if you don't explicitly apologize, you are done with all of these kinds of dealings with CBS and the American Music Awards and so on. And they show Justin doing exactly what he was told to do because he was getting his Grammy, his solo Grammy. And they show Janet Jackson saying, like, I'm not apologizing. And I
Right.
think they're very good at showing like why these two divergent paths happened. But it's almost an afterthought towards the end that Les Moonves was a serial predator as well. And I think you're sort of led to believe that if Janet had said something, you know, rearranged 18 words differently, her career wouldn't have been as affected as it was. And I think that's just not true. But you're left to put a lot of that together yourself.
Yeah, that's disappointing. I did like the piece in Slate that focuses solely on Justin Timberlake and how he was allowed to exist and behave the ways that he has for decades, and sort of like the public reckoning around him more recently. But it also, I think the part that's sort of crushing about that might be in the documentary you watched as well, is like, and it's in this book, is like, it's very easy to get forgiveness if you are a straight white guy in American society. Like, you get third and fourth and fifth chances. So even as there has been this reckoning, and he's given these apologies that I would argue are extremely practical for him at this point, for someone with a lot of media training to understand he needed to say something, even if to appear publicly contrite, even if he doesn't necessarily understand or feel it, he will still have another chance to come back. I mean, he just made a terrible album, and he will be allowed to make another one. Like, that's how the world works. So, I'm glad that Janet is getting her due. I hope the other documentary is less vague about the fact that she is not to blame here. Or this isn't like the Zapruder film, and like we're trying to understand a conspiracy, or it's like this person was victimized like by many different forces. And yeah, that's not great. I don't like hearing that.
No, and they draw a pretty important distinction between when she appeared on the cover of Rolling Stone and there were hands on her breasts, that was her partner. And they were saying like there's this huge important distinction that doesn't get made between that and, on another instance, her choosing to talk to talk show hosts about her nipple piercing, and then another distinction between that and what happened with her and Justin, right? And again, I don't know enough about this kind of insider baseball, and I feel like they're all kind of winking. They make it seem as though she and Justin agreed and she consented to some kind of something, right? But that some kind of malfunction happened or something else happened. And it's like, okay, but you actually don't seem to have evidence for that. And the fact that she's not participating tells me that isn't actually the story.
Yeah.
And like all these years later, we shouldn't still be kind of on conjecture.
Yeah, it does make me feel like if you were a female musician or celebrity and somebody wanted to make a documentary about you, like, do you really want to participate in that if you don't have final cut? Because you have no idea what story they're going to tell. Like, I haven't seen the Jagged Little Pill documentary either, but I know that Alanis already came out like months ago against it because she was like, this wasn't what the story I agreed to tell or something like that. So it does make you just wonder, like, what role you even have in these attempts to like frame your narrative or like restore some kind of power to you about some past wrongdoing against you. It's, not great.
We need parentheses Janet's version.
Oh my God, would love that. Like, wow, Janet is so underestimated. It's just like, that's a completely different episode, which I would be happy to get into. But like, The Velvet Rope alone is one of the greatest albums of all time. Never mind her content from the 80s. Like, can't even get into it. Justice for Janet. She still hasn't received it, it sounds like. But I mean, it's interesting to see, like, even with Britney's, like, the Free Britney movement or conservatorship has been ended, Janet's getting some public reassessment. Like, what will the long-term effect be?
I honestly think they kind of ended with people getting one of her older hits back in the top 10 for the first time in over 30 years, and kind of this reevaluation of Janet Jackson. And I think that that's still ongoing. I don't think that this documentary really does it. I think it's actually a documentary about her in the beginning and kind of her struggle within the Jackson family. And then it's a documentary about Justin getting a pass. Which is actually an important documentary, and is like, they show clip after clip of him talking about how she is so sexy and so hot and so beautiful, and like making a case that he had this fixation on her, which I was not aware of at all. And they show him in these moments where they're hyping up the Super Bowl, and his colleagues, for lack of a better word, like his other boy band members, people were all worried about Kid Rock that year. They're actually all respectful, like talking about Janet as an artist and as this insanely like beautifully talented performer. And he's like, she's hot. And they show him saying that over and over, but it does cast a different perspective on it of like why that pairing ended up happening. So I thought it was it's a good use of an hour. It's like really hour of tape, and so it's pretty good. I would say this book, Cultish, also a good use of a few hours. It's
I
relatively short.
mean, maybe our episode will be a few hours. We'll see. But
Right?
you
Longer
ready
than this
to
book.
get into the book?
I am. And so there's a few really good reviews. I recommend the review in The Atlantic if you want to look a little bit further into this book. But this is the second book by Amanda Montell, who also wrote Word Slut, A Feminist Guide to Taking Back the English Language, HarperCollins, 2019. She is a podcast host from Baltimore, and she asks the question, what makes cults so intriguing and frightening? What makes them powerful? The reason why so many of us binge Manson documentaries and fall down rabbit holes researching suburban moms gone QAnon is because we're looking for a satisfying explanation for what causes people to join and stay in extreme groups. We secretly want to know, could it happen to me? Amanda Montell's argument is that on some level it already has, and that's from the publisher.
Oof. What did you make of this book, Allison? Where would you like to begin?
So this book takes us through SoulCycle, her very brief entanglement with Scientology. We get some Jonestown information. We learn more about fitness. We circle back. We hear about her father's experience, basically coming of age in a cult. I guess let's do first impressions. It's a book that I enjoyed reading. I think it's a pretty quick read. I'm not sure I'm fully on board with every conclusion, but I also think that that is an expected and okay outcome of the book.
I think that's true. I think it's interesting because you and I, in varying degrees of investment, have been interested in cults like prior to taking up this book. So I think we came to this with more information about certain parts of it than she presumed. Like this book is actually very good as a starting place if you don't know much about cults or cult-ish movements, or just want to think about the idea of like what defines a cult. I think it's a really good introductory book, and it does have some really interesting like personal touches, as you're saying. I think my favorite parts of the book were actually where she's speaking to people who were in some of these movements and just kind of hearing from them. She does provide, because she has that kind of scholarly background, some passing references to research in psychology and anthropology and sort of urologies that might help you explain how these things develop and how people consent to stay in them and how we make sense of those things. And that was interesting too. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the Scientology part to me was interesting to hear her experience. But also, like, as you know, you and I have been in very deep on Scientology for a very long time. So there wasn't like a lot of new information there per se.
No, so if you've never really heard a lot about Jonestown, or if you've never really heard a lot about different kind of fitness cultures, right? If you've never listened to a podcast about Amway, a lot of this will be pretty shocking to you. But I think if you have done deeper dives, the function of the book of this for you is to think about why language is so powerful. So her training is that she's a linguist. She attended NYU, and that's really her background. She's interested in how language functions. And we were saying earlier, one of the things that she, I think, is very smart about is, you can join a fitness group where everyone dresses similarly. They pay high dues, and you start all speaking in a certain kind of way. How I perceive her cutoff of cult is if, one, that takes over your life, and B, you can't leave without violence. I would say other than that, she's pretty general about this kind of cultish umbrella, which is anything that includes this obsession and devotion to shared language and experience. But it becomes a cult, right? You drop the ish when there is that fear or inability to leave.
Yeah, or like the sense that you won't be able to function as a person without this system of beliefs, that you can't just opt in and opt out of it. Like she at one point presents a fitness program that she actually ends up liking because it's empowering of women, and primarily because when she interviews the founder makes it really clear that she's reacting against those kind of attachments to fitness programs, and that everything is meant to empower the women and not make them reliant on the system, or like suggest that they won't be able to function without it or something, which is sort of how CrossFit is. Like that to me was the surprise of this book, was that I kind of knew some stuff about Jonestown. You probably know way more than I do about that. I've read a lot about Scientology and MLMs and things like that, but she really puts a juxtaposition between things that most people would agree were cults and things that you might not think of as cults, and sort of asking the question, like, what's the difference between, like, the opening image is between a religious cult and CrossFit. And I don't really know much about CrossFit, full disclosure, not a member of a box, which is another phrase I didn't know or term. But, it is interesting to think about, like, how do we define our relationship to the things that we love, and how would you differentiate between something being a healthy attachment and in many ways like these unhealthy attachments?
I think too, like a lurking, not a problem with the book, but a thing that it made me curious about is the book is primarily about defining and figuring out the power of language in cults. A follow-up book that I think would be maybe like a more optimistic or like more practical guide to living in the here and now would be on community, right? Like what actually
Mm.
makes community and where is the line between a community and a cult? Because I think that that's actually the $1 billion question. So, like, full disclosure, we have talked to people before who have asked us about what we do on our Patreon. And part of it, I do think, is a little bit of luck. But I think part of it is that we think about community a lot as people, and we've been in different kinds of communities. And to me, that is like the big thing, right? This is not what that book is about, but I think it's actually a longing for community as much as meaning that drives a lot of this. And defining the difference between those two things, I think, is actually harder.
Yeah, I agree. And something that I kind of wish she had lingered on a bit more is there's a part in the book where she's trying to understand, like, how do people make this choice to kind of really lean into these groups? So she studies, or like repeats a study that someone did statistically, that's like, when people try to rescue someone from a cult, that's actually misguided, because most people are just going to leave of their own volition when they realize it's not for them. And it's only like, what, like 5% or something, they're really
Mm-hmm.
hanging in there. And you taking them out of it is not going to actually break that connection, because what's going on is like an intellectual or mental thing. And she talks a lot about like getting into disinformation culture, or like telling you something you're predisposed to believe, and like creating a connection with you, and then using like what she calls stop words, to make you stop thinking or questioning their logic, and like drawing you in closer. So she's making it very psychological. And I actually wonder how much of it is about loneliness. Like, I
Mm.
think, and she kind of signals at the beginning of the book, where she talks about the things in our world today that predispose people to want community and cultish experiences. But I think loneliness can't be underestimated as a thing that might drive you to connect with other people in something that even at first you may not fully understand.
That's why I still think, and I know that I depart from a lot of other people with this. I took issue with The Dream. It was not a podcast that I ended up really enjoying. It was a podcast that I had a lot of issues with the tone and the way that certain things were talked about. And ultimately, what I felt like was a condescension, right, that underlined a lot of what the team was investigating. By contrast, the podcast that was made several years ago about the group, I am completely blanking on it. I have it right in front of me. Where is it? They all decide to depart their vehicles and to transcend to a higher plane. Heaven's Gate.
Heaven's Gate. Oh,
My
okay.
apologies. So, Heaven's Gate, I thought that some of the investigative work on that was far more compelling, in part because there are people who left or who chose not to do that. And they still feel this deep longing that they wish they had departed their vehicles. They wish they had been there. They have a very different reaction to what that group chose to do. Whereas Jonestown, in contrast, when the group on its final day, when people are ingesting the flavor aid, when they are ingesting drugs, when they are taking the orders from Jim Jones, that's a very different situation than the adults who were part of Heaven's Gate, in part because of how it ends, because the endings are actually quite different. I feel like having sympathy and having empathy is something that she does really well, right? Like she really wants to understand. But I also think there there are truths about cults that we'll never really know because a person who is critical enough to write this book, I feel like has never been rock bottom enough to actually be in one, like to be that 5%.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And I think the kind of phenomenon that you're describing of like, we will never understand 100% what was happening in Heaven's Gate. But also, like, it's not our job to condescend to people who believed in something that we don't believe to be true. Like, if what we're trying to do is understand how they were organizing the world and their place within it, and that's actually what historians are trying to do, or at least my understanding of it. So in a way, it's like Amanda's training as being a linguist, but I thought she actually made a good effort actually being a historian, or trying to just get as close as we could to what people involved thought was happening. But as you say, it's like, particularly with Jonestown, it's like for the people who died, like we won't know, we will never be able to understand like what was happening in their heads during that, because as you're saying, Heaven's Gate ended really differently for folks who aren't familiar with either. I mean, Jonestown ends with the murder of a congressman ordered by Jim Jones and a squad. I mean, you may know more about this than I do, but and then he makes it seem like they're about to be attacked, so everyone has to move on to the next plane, and there's like he calls it revolutionary suicide.
Yeah. And there are questions. It's interesting in her treatment of that incident. There are books that have come out more recently where people have done different kinds of investigative work. And I'm not questioning her work at all, but you read like a thicker tome on Jonestown. What actually went on in those final hours, particularly, is still debated, right? Like there is still actually a lot of controversy over exactly how drugged, exactly how much was ordered versus free choice, which is part of what makes it still kind of a story. I will say we were originally going to record this show on the Jonestown anniversary date and instead recorded on the anniversary date of the assassination of John F. Kennedy. So wow. I don't know what kind of vibe that gives you by the time you listen to this, but think it over. We don't do anything by accident.
I've been thinking about JFK all day.
I know you have.
I'm going to have to sit with some footage later and just... I mean, I'm not over it. Like, I don't feel like we will ever get the answers on that. And I hate the fact that Trump and I both want more evidence released. Like, I don't want to have anything in common with that individual, but, here we are.
Aliens. Like, he made many promises that were either problematic or untrue. But I will say, like, something why I find Heaven's Gate really compelling is, and the reason why I've appreciated more recent podcast treatments of it, you can't say for certain that you know what happened when they departed their vehicles. You actually don't know. So as part of my own personal growth, I like to read what physicists talk about on Twitter, and I like to kind of see what's out there, not because I'm trying to become a physicist, but it's a reality check that there's a very complex universe that we're part of. You don't know, right? Like we have a simplistic understanding of what happened in the house that day, with the tracksuits and the sneakers and the ice cream and the logbooks. You don't actually know what happened to their bodies, which I think is also part of the appeal of cults and intentional communities. We're all looking for answers. And I actually think a misread of a lot of cults is that, people are looking for answers. Smart people join cults because they think they've found other people who've reached conclusions reasonably close enough to their own. And that's a really huge distinction.
So they're not like the members of Heaven's Gate were like, I'm still trying to get answers here. And I think you people might draw me into the right direction. They're all joining saying, I think you guys all assume the same thing happens that I do.
I think it starts with you're on a quest for answers and these people are on a quest for answers. And I think some people join groups because they're looking to be told, right? And I think a lot of people, though, because they're saying your ideal cult recruit is not a person who never thinks for themselves. You're actually looking for someone who has that curiosity, who is willing to spend time with you. And I think part of the people who hang around, that 5 to 10 very loyal %, they have found answers in conversations that are satisfying to them. Because and this is like something I've heard in a lot of podcasts and from different things, the concept of brainwashing is unsophisticated and not really accurate. It's not really what happens to people. And something I found myself kind of struggling with thinking about this book afterward is she points out how often we use thought terminating cliches. An example being it is what it is, or oh, everything is a cult. Because honestly, there is some weight to those, right? Like if someone is selling essential oils out of their house and they're not claiming they offer a cure, but they're saying, these smell nice and I would like you to have these because I think they smell nice and I think you'll smell nice too. Full disclosure, I also used to go to an Herbalife cafe because I really liked the shakes and it was a place that I enjoyed being and they were very nice to me for reasons that are obvious.
Oh boy.
I'm not saying that I support the larger superstructure of MLM, but I also think there is a reality to saying many things are cults. And you can kind of walk away from this book saying capitalism is also a cult. And I'm not saying she ends on a doom and gloom, but I understand why those cliches are cliches. They are not fully untrue.
That's definitely true. And I think something it made me think a lot about is sort of like you could do an inventory of your own understanding of belonging and the things that you consider yourself either as like a community member or what do you feel like you belong to? And it actually made me think about that Benedict Anderson book on nationalism, like Imagine Communities, like which has a lot of the same tangents that she identifies here as things that are true of cults. Like, do you have a shared language? Do you have shared rituals? And you could think about things like Duncan, Shiro Nation, our own cult, perhaps, or Red Sox Nation, or things that don't have a geographic space per se, but have shared cultural touchstones. And also reference Casper ter Kuile, who researches at Harvard Divinity School, who is the person who did a report on what millennials kind of like where they find community that's not religion. And he's the person who kind of surfaces CrossFit being an important space or Soul Cycle. And keeping all of that in mind, it's like it does make you wonder like what kinds of things in our own lives we have that kind of relationship to. And do you ever consider like what is the health or like what is a healthy relationship to any of these things?
I think part of where she lands and part of what it made me think about is you can be very cryptic and you can be very smart and cynical and say, well, the whole community in our Discord, it's not real. Or say, this message board I'm in, it's not real. Or this isn't real. Or my father's bowling league wasn't real. And then you're very quickly left with nothing. Right? Like if your whole sort of theory is that all of these communities lack the right kind of tangible qualities or lack the kind of the right balance of like good for you and good for the world, you're not really left with a whole lot. I will say it made me reflect the work that I do at my day job. It had never really been something I flagged because I'm very fond of acronyms and what you could consider as kind of like insider language. I have a friend who just can never remember and can never remember what things stand for. And he was the person who pointed out to me when I had not noticed it. It is rare to go a day or to even have a conversation where you are not using multiple forms of shorthand and tons of acronyms and tons of like abbreviations that only we use. And it's very like obvious to me because I'm in a group for people who do the job that I do. And I would say most posts would be unrecognizable to people who don't do these jobs. They would not understand what they are about.
So in a way, it's like there's also, it seems like some gatekeeping built in there too.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Like I have to make an effort when I am training a person to not use kind of the normal language that I would use in just a workspace because there are so many things that we use as shorthand or there's a lot of holdover from when it was part of the military. For example, most people call the days that they're not working their days off. At my job, that is your lieu day. It is your day in lieu of work. You will not hear people at my workplace calling it their day off. It's their lieu day. How did you spend your lieu days? We don't say weekend because weekend is gatekeepy to us because most of us don't work a Monday through Friday.
Got it.
So it's kind of a whole, I think what she would say is like, yes, like language is part of how you build up identity, how you share different things. I think the difference is if you want to leave and you want to quit, you can. Right?
Right.
Like
Like you
you
can
can
work
leave.
and you know you can function as a person if you leave this job or this
Yes.
profession. And I think really that is like the healthy sign. When she has that passage where she translates a Scientologist textbook passage, like that took me out because I couldn't understand a word of that without her translation. I was like,
I love
I'm,
that.
I mean, it was like so intense. It made me laugh though, and I had to go watch that video with Tom Cruise when he's getting his like Man of the Millennium award from
Yes.
Scientology. They make this insane video. Like I don't know how he agreed to this being public. I don't think he thought it ever would be, but he's first of all wearing a turtleneck, like interesting, brave choice. And he's laughing maniacally about like, oh yeah, well that's how you tell that person's an SP, right? Like, ah, and it's like, oh my God. But like that's what the first time you publicly saw him use a lot of Scientology like acronyms and lingo. And it was, I think, very isolating for people who were like, no, he's not in too deep. Like, it's cool. It's just like his religion. Like, everybody chill out. And then that video came out and it was like, whoa, 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 whoa. So it's like, not only does language constitute meaning, but I do think it kind of like, it shows kind of like your barrier to like mainstream culture or the ways that you've chosen
Mm.
to divert from it.
I think actually this is one of the reasons why Dickinson is one of the most brilliant shows that Apple TV, for its own reasons, it never promotes. Emily Dickinson's writing is something that I think could be a struggle for a lot of people to connect to because it wasn't meant for you, right? It wasn't
Right.
meant for us to pick up and read. And there's been a lot of people who have had to work on her language. Part of what I love about the show is the seamless way that people talk with 19th century parlance and 21st century parlance, and the way that R&B and hip hop and modern pop music are blended in, and the way that really vague or really obscure and challenging passages in her poetry are made completely understandable, like different ways that she talks about nature or evokes nature. We see it visually and it helps us understand, I think, like where she could have gotten the idea for what can be really pretty difficult language to decipher, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if people think Taylor Swift's lyrics are, a challenge to decipher or find the true meanings, like Emily Dickinson is like the OG for me. But I agree, that show is so brilliant, and it's fascinating to me to see the ways like nobody is advertising that, but everyone
No.
is pushing Morning Show season 2, which I did just finish. It is the most psychotic show I've ever seen in my life. Like I don't understand what I just watched. I did watch every episode. Allison, I can't give you a summary. Like, I don't even know what, I don't know. I wanted almost like the characters, the actors are in a cult themselves, where I wanted to tap them on the shoulder, pull them aside at various times, and just say, what do you believe is going on here?
Can I tell you the totally unhinged reason why I don't watch that show?
Why?
So I have sort of, and I think this fits perfectly with what Amanda Montell would say is a hallmark of our current mode. I have really yet to read a book that was part of Reese's Imagined Book Club that I didn't really enjoy. I didn't like LA weather for a whole variety of reasons, but I didn't hate it either. And in my mind, when I go to the bookstore now, she and I have this connection where we both
Oh
have
boy.
very prominent chins, and Reese is like my reading buddy. She's not just an actress anymore. Like, that's stuff she used to do. Like, I don't care what she's acting in now. She had Legally Blonde. She's on TikTok just like me. She loves to read. Like, in my mind now, she is a reader and a
Got it.
book influencer, not an
Yes.
actor. So I'm not interested in her body of work.
Okay. I mean, honestly, like that doesn't really track with me, but I don't question it. And in a sense, like that impulse is going to protect you here because
Yeah.
what I've just seen, what I mean, I'm having to watch Columbo to decompress from what I just put myself through. Like, if anyone's never seen it, like they're trying to take on the Today Show Matt Lauer stuff, at least initially. And then they, for whatever reason, are like, we're gonna give like the Matt Lauer character played by Steve Carell like a redemption arc, or he's like, it's like, what do you do with a man who's canceled? I want to be better, like and it's like nobody cares. Stop. Like, why are we focusing on this man? Then from nowhere, season 2, Reese Witherspoon season 1 was a brunette to be different than Jennifer Aniston, her co-star. season 2, she's back to blonde, never explained, and they've decided to bring on Juliana Margulies as her love interest. Again, we're not, this is never explained. And just among the 50 things that are never explained, at one point, Juliana Margulies is like, well, obviously I have to go because, my heart defect and COVID is happening. And it's like, were we told you had a heart defect? I had to pause it and Google, like, when did we learn about what's her heart defect? We were never told. And it's just like, I can't. So maybe Reese probably wasn't clocking this. She was probably off camera reading, I guess, at the time, trying to find the next great book. And I respect that life choice, but
the woman doesn't miss. I gotta tell you, I don't know if it's just like we have a lot in common that I wasn't aware of.
You haven't seen the morning show. She does miss. You don't. I mean, I'm happy for her book influencer career because it does seem like she has a good eye. But I mean, it would be nice if like she kind of every once in a while took those eyes and glanced back over at the film side of the biz and was like, wait, what does this script say I'm doing next? Like, it's...
See, I can't go there because I have a Draper James purse and I have a Draper James dress. Wow. And so for me, it's like, well, she has impeccable style. She was in some movies years ago. Gosh, who can even think of more than a few? And she's just like a reading friend. And I think Amanda Montell would say the fact that she's a person that I choose to, quote, follow, right, as a kind of guru on social media. If she started advocating for things that I didn't agree with, I am not so far down that I couldn't pull myself out. And I think part of what this book does really brilliantly is it's not just that those people are weak. That's a total misread. It's not that those other people who are doing the leading are strong. It's like we end up with these toxic imbalances of power when nothing goes checked. From what I'm hearing, this Apple TV show is kind of checking Reese Witherspoon's power in the universe, and we're all the better for it.
I mean, I can't tell what end is up on this show. I mean, I finished this days ago. I'm still thinking about it a significant amount of time throughout my day. It's embarrassing. It's keeping me going. I don't know. It's like, it's a math problem I'll never solve. That's how I feel about the morning show. And that's okay with me. Completely fine. But I mean, it is weird to think, okay, so like you're following Reese, which I respect. Good life choice. Although I think her son's DJ career is sus and perhaps she shouldn't promote it as much. But anyway, like, who are the people, like, did this book make you at all think about, like, would you be someone who could be drawn into a cult? Or, like, who would you be in a cult? I know we've talked about this before.
100. I don't have any doubt. I don't have any doubt whatsoever. I think anything that had to do with, like, the possibility for astral projection, I think anything that would be about the universe or questioning certain elements of that, like, I could absolutely be all in. A cult-like environment that I think we have both kind of pulled ourselves out of is there are certain elements of the professional world that we were trained for that I think never appealed to us. And now when I see problems happening in that corner of the universe, nothing happens to me. I don't feel any kind of pull. I don't feel compelled to be part of it. So I think that is something that I have kind of gotten away from. I don't know that I would move to a remote location because I lack the domestic skills, but I do know that if I could give up a considerable portion of my income and never have to do daily caretaking tasks again, I would in a heartbeat.
Fair. Entirely.
Like, I would give up a lot of choice. There are a lot of choices that I would give up to never have to cook, clean, change my cat's litter box, etc., etc. Like, I would give up a lot and a lot of my income for that.
Damn. I mean, yeah. I don't know where I'm at with joining a cult. I don't know that that it would be necessarily for me. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that answer has changed over time for me, but I think I like the appeal of a community, of living in community with other people, or a commune situation I could get into. If, like, my dream commune is like a bunch of friends, we all live on a piece of land, we all have our own structures that we live in that are ours, private. I don't want to share a wall with anybody. I don't want to share a ceiling with somebody. I like my own space. but at the same time, like to have community time together, to like garden in community. We have a very good friend from college whose like dream basically is to like join a commune or
Mm-hmm.
utopian community, and I respect that. I don't know if I'm as dedicated to that as her, but I like it in theory, I guess. And also, I think something different from my life experience than yours is like I was raised in Catholicism, so it was totally normal for me growing up to consider as a life path like becoming a nun, living in community with other women, and that always seemed very admirable to me. And like part of the appeal of that Lauren Groff book I just read was, which was nominated for a National Book Award, so
Yeah.
congrats to her. Was it really just bears out like the benefits and the beautiful facets of living in community. Where I couldn't deal with it is if we had like a thought leader at the top who is telling us what to do and this and that. Like I couldn't hang with that. Like I would either have to be the leader or I'd have to be out. That's my
See,
feeling.
I'm like fully prepared to be that person's administrative assistant.
There you go. So we could potentially run our own cult, is what I'm hearing.
I don't think it would take much. I gotta be honest with you. Like I really like verbal affirmations, and even when they were nice to me at what pretty readily apparently became an Herbalife front, it's like,
Wow.
I do really like the chocolate chips in my shake, and so um
You're like, whatever you say, guys.
and I understand that there are debates right now about, should you support a friend who is in a multi-level marketing situation or a family member, or should you full stop never support those things? And I think where some of that gray area comes in is sometimes you buy a thing and you actually don't know right away what you are part of.
That's 100% true. Like, I think everyone who's listening to this and you and I, like, we have all bought things or gone to parties to support family member or friend, like basically some version of a Tupperware party, as she describes in this book. And I didn't know what the stuff was. Like, I've bought things where I'm like, I don't think I'll ever use whatever this thing might be. Like, I remember buying a cooking utensil. I had no idea what it was, but I was
Yeah.
like, at my cousin's party, like, I'm here, I'm going to buy this thing. I think what's interesting, and like it's not part of this book and it's not really her project, so this isn't a criticism, but there's a part where she reaches out to a high school or childhood friend who's in an MLM. She sees it on Facebook. They've been out of touch. And what she learns is like this person was like, no, it's 100% a cult. And I did it because my husband had cancer and like, I'd gained weight and like presumably the financial strain of that. And her mother-in-law presents it to her as like a way out. So she takes it with very kind of like clear vision of why she's doing it. So she's not being drawn into a cult per se. But I think what would have been interesting or a different alternative is like, what if someone reached out to her from a position of mutual aid and was like,
Mm.
hey, listen, the healthcare system in our country is a hellscape. But here's what I've learned in my experience. Like, you can call a hospital directly and negotiate your health bill. So maybe like let's start there and like give her like practical tips that are not let's sell mystery diet. Like you can't say the name of that company on Facebook. That blew my mind.
Yeah, because I think she points to the complexity of it, right? That it's not always like, here is my product that I'm obviously peddling as part of a multi level
Right.
marketing scheme. And I also think I had a disagreement with my brother. So, one of his friends during the GameStop thing made $60,000 in approximately like one part of an afternoon because he knew which kind of levers to pull figuratively on the stock market. And I
Wow.
said, "Do you think that's ethical? Because I don't think that's ethical." And he said, "That's the game. That's what it is." And he's not wrong. But to me, I think we also spend a lot of time culturally blaming people who don't have other outlets for advancement, for selling milkshakes or for selling different kinds of things, when people with more money are playing games that do destroy our economy, and then we have to bail them out.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and the thing that's interesting that she kind of gets into, because she does invoke Trump throughout the book
Right.
as someone who's formulating a cult around himself by drawing on fascism and racism and, disinformation and all kinds of stuff, is like he's not afraid to say the thing that people, as she puts it, would say if all of their internal barriers were down. And he like draws people to him who find that attractive. He pretends as though he's speaking to back to systemic inequalities and the abuses that, you know, most people on both sides would agree exist in our political system. Like, it seems intractable. Here's this guy who's like, I'm an outsider, but I also like was a form, like, I'm an MLM hustler, and he as a child attends the church of Norman Vincent Peale of the Power of Positive Thinking. Like, he comes from a very like weird but specific cultural moment. And of course people find him seductive, but a lot of what's seductive about him is like he uses those stop phrases that make you not think or question his logic. And of course that's gotten us into like a great deal of trouble nationally.
But I will say, at work, I was part of a Dale Carnegie training, and it is not that different. It is not that different. If you attend a formal corporate style or corporate adapted training, because we had to put up in groups what are the different attributes of a great leader. And I said, and people thought I was being silly or joking, I said, are we talking a leader in a workplace or like a cult? People were like, oh, Allison, like, of course we're talking about in a workplace. And I was like, but actually it's important because the thing that might make you the ideal leader of a church or an ideal leader of a business might actually be very different than what makes you an effective leader in a workplace. But we talk about it as if it's all the same. I think there has to be something intrinsically different about you to want to be the president of the United States.
Yeah, 100%. Or to be famous. Like, honestly, there's something about that that's not normal. Like, not in a per se bad way, but just that impulse is probably not something most people share. I don't have it.
Like, my friend Reese, like, she's not in it for the fame. She just wants people to read good books with her.
I'm sorry, did you not see her formative role in election? Like, why, as my grandmother always used to say, like, if someone was really good at playing a villain, she'd be like, no one's that good an actor. Like, no one.
I think Reese is, because this whole time it's been all about the literature for her, but she's had to go through, you know, these different public things to amass her millions to own Hello Sunshine.
And then sell it to a venture capital firm. So
yeah,
American dream, baby. Yeah, I mean, her role as June Carter Cash was, I mean, like, that's a high for me. So, you know, I'll never forget Reese doing that. Learning some music. I didn't see her read a book in that movie. I'll have to go back and rewatch it. But, you know, yeah, she had a lot going on. But I do think, like, there's something about her, Amanda Montell's kind of project that you're like, well, where's the boundary around this? And that might be the point, is that there isn't one. But because you could look at this and be like, well, where's like the takedown of like corporate America, which is partly here, but not really her project. Like, everyone's job has like weird lingo you use at your job that, like you were saying before, most people wouldn't understand if they didn't work in your industry or whatever. Like, my brother's a pilot. He has like a lot of weird lingo I'll never understand. But you have that like weird TED Talk culture in corporate America, that, like, you know, rise and grind, all of that stuff. Like, there are people in religions where they find a lot of real meaning and it contributes to their health and happiness, where there is a lot of like shared belief and ritual and shared language. So it's sort of like, where does she draw these boundaries between things that could be, or some people might understand to be, a healthy part of their life and not?
I also learned from this book that apparently I use a lot of expressions that are fuddy-duddy corporate lingo. Like, I talk about bandwidth. I say circle back all the time. Like, there are several phrases that I use all of the time. And I think part of what's interesting too, like, I've gotten on the side of TikTok that is kind of more linguistically oriented. And there are times where people are saying, you know, if you sign your emails best, comma, that's an act of aggression, except for when it's not, except for when... And, you know, I do relate hard to the memes that say, like, I am going to put 4 exclamation points in this email, except for where I put a period, so you don't think that I'm having an episode. And I relate to that because I think a lot does get lost, right? Or a lot of the communication is complicated, where I would love to see a neuroscientist or someone with a different background. I think it's telling that this starts and ends with exercise, because I think something does happen to the body when it's exercising. We know that. That's science. And this kind of idea that people are chanting together as these endorphins are being released, right? And as you're creating these pathways, I've been thinking about this a lot because I genuinely think I would be a different person if I had enjoyed gym class. And I completely am not saying that as a joke. Like, I really struggle to exercise and I struggle to find ways to do fitness that I can find enjoyable. And as I'm doing it, it's like I am rewriting what was essentially 17 years of feeling like this isn't for me. I'm not being
Mm.
told anything verbally that this is a thing I should be enjoying or should be good at. Whereas if someone 15, more than 15, 20 plus years ago had said, hey, you're doing really well at that, and like, here's other ways that you could enjoy this, I would be a different person today.
That's interesting. I mean, it is interesting to think that, she makes that connection to using your body, and also like your point, like the kind of like rituals and structures where we give people permission to kind of take ownership of their body, or like to feel empowered to exercise it or move it in ways, discover ways that moving your body feels good to you and empowering. Like my wife says the same thing about gym class, and basically said like if I could have done yoga in gym class, I would have had a completely different experience because she hated it. I love gym class, so like I can't, like I'm not going to pretend that I understand because I don't. But I take your point. I mean, it's like when you're in spaces or rituals or situations that don't feel like you're like that they are open to you or you belong to them, like it is very off-putting. And then it's kind of like you feel like you're the only member who's not part of a cult in a cult setting, and that's, very off-putting.
Yeah, because to her point, they're getting that verbal affirmation, they're getting that celebration, they're hearing the right kinds of things. I remember this so vividly. I was the slowest to walk a mile. I do think in retrospect the guidance was to run, but I did not hear that, or I did not receive that guidance. And it took me over 25 minutes. And I remember this like very clearly, where they were like, do you think you could have done that any slower? And I said,
Oh my
yeah.
god, that's
I said
awful.
yes, because there were there were points at which I thought I was doing pretty okay. And then I quickly realized they were sort of being sarcastic.
That
And
is
I
not
think
okay.
honestly, like, that was one of my sliding door moments with my body, where maybe if they had asked me why I was walking the way that I was actually like, really, I remember this so well. I was really catching a vibe. We walked through the woods at my elementary school, and I remember just really enjoying it. And I think about that now, like, the laugh is on them because now I'm a park ranger who helps people to experience nature and
There you
experience
go.
landscape. And instead of saying like, hey, like, what were you observing, like, what were you enjoying about that walk, it was like, you're a loser, that was terrible. And
Oh my
did I
god.
fully understand that we were being timed? Like, clearly not. Right, like,
Right.
clearly. But also maybe I was on my own assignment that now it serves me better, right? Like, now I take people for walks and we're not timing ourselves and we're enjoying and experiencing. And it just goes to show you, like, you never know what people are going to remember from elementary school.
That is certainly true. That is definitely true. I think what you're saying is just reminding me of Alison Bechdel's new book about fitness, which I don't know if you've read it, but you would really enjoy it because it's sort of like her journey through trying to find ways of moving her body that felt comfortable for her, and like not letting herself get too competitive in whatever the thing was she was trying, because that's like a facet of her personality. And anyway, it's like a journey of a lifetime, but it also offers a history of fitness culture, so it's kind of interesting. But yeah, I mean, gym class is like harmful to everyone, it feels like. But it was interesting that she was so focused on it. It kind of focuses on like religious groups, MLMs,
Mm-hmm.
and fitness groups. But why doesn't she take on groups who are identify as fans, like sports fan communities?
Mm.
Like I would consider a lot of sports groups. I'm making it seem like I'm not myself a sport fan, but like I'm not like a cultish member, but I know of people who are like, I am a diehard fan of X team. And it's very important to them to be identified as a member of that group. Like you have shared beliefs, there's like phrases, there's rituals, you watch the game, whatever. It would have been interesting for her to examine, I thought, a group like that in conjunction with the fitness group. Like, what does it mean to have it not be like a bodily experience? And like I don't know, like, and to me, the fitness piece allows her to tie into the MLN because there's like the pyramid scheme of it, of the like paying a membership. But sports is like
Mm.
that too, or dare I say, American Girl. Like, I mean, is American Girl a cult, Allison?
I don't think so. And I think part of it is, well, I think she would draw a line between fandom and fanaticism, right? That there are fans and there are fanatics, and that is part of the difference. In the same way that there are people who are casually religious, and then there are people who are like capital R religious or
Mm-hmm.
actually part of it. I think maybe one of the differences she might draw with sports is you might be really in tune with chanting a ritual while you are watching a sports game, or you might be very into it, but it's a siloed part of your life, whereas these fitness communities become all consuming. And I don't know that I agree with that distinction, but I think that that is what the book kind of argues.
I think that's true, but I think there are some fans out there who probably feel like their devotion to, and it just doesn't have to be sports. It could be like Lady Gaga or whatever. Insert this,
Oh,
like, whatever
sure.
here. Like, there's in Comic Con communities, which I don't know much about, but I've seen like sort of documentary footage of some of those conventions and like how ardently people are there, like preparing for that day, and like they think about it and they study all the trivia. It's like, I don't know. It seems like there's something going on with that too.
I think where she tries to end the book on a semi positive note is to say, don't be overly cynical, enjoy things, right? Go in with an open mind while still being somewhat guarded. And I think one of the challenges and part of where I struggled, particularly with the second season of The Dream, is trying to get your mind to where you understand there are people who enjoyed selling leggings, right? There are
Right.
people who enjoyed wearing leggings and selling them and being part of a community. And yes, it ended disastrously for many people, but not everybody. And those are the people I think that Amanda Montell kind of has her eyes on, right? If this tanked for everybody, we wouldn't be talking about it,
Right.
right? The reason why it still kind of remains compelling, I watch one of the young mom influencers on TikTok every single day. I probably watch at least 5 minutes of her content every single day. And part of it is that curiosity of, will this go sideways? Does she really actually just survive on fruit and coconut water? It does appear that she does. It's that curiosity, right? Of like this other kind of way of living that I want to better understand, if not participate in. Like, she will buy hundreds of dollars worth of bananas.
That's a mystery to me. One I
Yeah.
will perhaps never solve. But I mean, to me, the closest I felt like I ever got to being in the head of somebody who ardently was invested in it, admittedly writing from a perspective of being out of it, but reading Leah Remini's book, like, in all
Mm.
seriousness, that is a really good memoir by someone who, like, in a very honest way was like, this was what I thought I was doing. Like, this is, it's appealed to me. Like, I loved being part of this for a very long time until I didn't. And then she kind of takes you through that. But at least the first part of the book, it's like, whoa, okay. Like, I mean, I think that's what's kind of what's needed is people just giving honest assessments or sharing, like, for people for whom it's a good experience, like, what is this doing for you? Because I think that would help dispel the myth of brainwashing as even
Mm.
something that's happening there, because really it is like that kind of robs someone of their agency because they are choosing it. And I think it's helpful to kind of understand like what it is they think they're choosing.
A book that I will never not bring up because it helped my brain understand what history was for. The Great Cat Massacre by Robert Darnton is a book I bring up all the time. And the central focus of it is on why a certain kind of French peasant, and particularly apprentices, they would murder cats and they would viciously hurt cats. And it was a kind of release and humor for them. And the purpose of the book was to say, if we can understand why this functioned for these people, we can understand their culture in a meaningful way. And the point is not to say that you are for or against that behavior. I am obviously personally against it, but the point is to say, what is the function of that? And you could go down to a Purdue chicken factory and say, what is the function of torturing chickens en masse so people can eat dino-shaped nuggets. There is a social function to those kinds of things. I would say, like, if you are someone who's been very interested in cults for a long time, honestly, if you take nothing else away, the idea of the thought terminating cliche, like, I have already brought that up to multiple people to say that is something I've never heard so succinctly explained.
Mm-hmm.
And even the way that some people talk to children, like, because I said so, or it is what it is, what you are training them to do in childhood is to not actually probe. It ends the conversation. And I thought that was a really good takeaway for just life.
Yeah, and just I think, you know, the way that she introduces it and points you to places where you'll find a million examples of it, like social media and in political debates. Like, even if you just pay attention to the news and what you see on Facebook, I started noticing them all over the place too. And it was like, wow. I mean, to me, that was probably like one of the biggest things I learned from this book or will take with me as a concept.
I don't know, maybe I'll join a spin class.
Oh
I'm
my
trying
God.
I'm I've become acquainted with a spinning guild, so women who spin on spinning wheels. And I bought a spinning wheel off of someone on Facebook Marketplace. So if you catch me
Oh
like
my God.
shearing sheep on the regular, like, you'll know that I've gone off a little bit.
Okay. We'll keep our eye on you.
Okay.
We'll, you know, wow, that's a lot. That's a lot.
I just won't be at their level for years, so I know that, like, the bar to entry is just way too high.
Fair enough. I mean, we'll see where you land with this. I mean, I'll be interested to see like what you produce or how your where your first projects are.
I do also I love the way she captures the very specific kind of language that is used when someone you haven't talked to in 20 years is trying to sell you something, because I see it on my Facebook stories every single day where it's like, ladies, let's talk. My high school alumni group turned very quickly into an MLM cross promotion group,
Oh
and it
God.
went there immediately.
That's truly terrifying. I've received those invitations on Facebook and I don't really go on Facebook much, so I've missed most of the sales or events that I've been invited to, but the language is like she hits that so spot on. It's like nuts. When I open my messages and I see like, "Hey girly," I'm like, "No, I'm scared."
See,
No.
I immediately say yes. I once bought a $65 bag that had a Bible quote from 31 because it was supporting my sister's friend. So I probably shouldn't say this. Like, you send me that message and, like, hey girl, I'm
It's
probably
on.
gonna buy that thing. I'm probably gonna buy that thing. And I think that is why these things
Wow.
persist, because of those fundamental human different responses that we have to them.
That's fair. Yeah. Oh my God. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Well, you know, Allison, next month on our Patreon, we are going to kind of a cult that you've been a member of for some time. Do you want to remind folks what we're doing?
We are reading Anderson Cooper's Vanderbilt Story of an American Family. I will say, folks, I was on my library's wait list. It was never going to happen in time, so I had to go rush out and buy it from a bookstore. Get on this one fast because the demand is hot.
The demand is high. I also tried to get it from my library and I got it for like one period of time. It came very early. I wasn't ready for it. I thought I was going to have to wait. Then it got recalled and then I just had to buy it on Kindle.
Yep.
So that's where I'm at, but I can't wait. I thought we would never get this book.
No, it's a book that we need. It's a book that we have been waiting for. And it's a nice kind of, way to think about consumption a little bit differently this November and December. We love seeing your ideas about what we should cover for next year. So keep those coming, especially, the winter months. We kind of went a little bit darker, a little bit heavier last January and February, and those tend to be tougher months. So, whatever you want us to cover, maybe we'll do a little Sister Karen book from the Babysitters Club archives. You let us know.
We could, or we could watch something, you know, open to everything. And of course, we like to watch alongs and we like to see how you're using that space yourselves to have your own watch alongs. But if you want to suggest one for the whole group, we're open to that as well.
Absolutely. Mary, where should people find you? Where should they send their hey girly messages?
I want to hear "Hey
Don't.
Girly" from you, but as
Yeah.
just not like a cult invitation or an MLM. But please feel free to reach me at "Hey Girly" or actually at Mimi Mahoney on Instagram and at Mary Mahoney123 on Twitter. Allison, where should I request that you take part in my pop-up shop of, bags, necklaces, statement necklaces, things of that kind?
Listen, I am a very devoted FabFitFun follower, and I will proselytize about FabFitFun to anyone who will listen. That is not a joke. You can find me at Allison Horrocks on Twitter and Instagram, and you can follow the show at A Girls Pod and American Girls Podcast on Instagram. Look for us, follow us, leave us a review. That's extremely helpful. Anything you'd like to do to connect with the show, we're out there. Just like the truth.
Oh my God. Wow.
Ish. Ish. Ish.